My name's Marcus. I'm 30 years old, and 6 months ago, I brought a $400 million environmental consulting firm to its knees by doing absolutely nothing except enforcing a contract, completely legally. My attorney still sends me holiday cards. I think he wept at the signing. Let me set the scene. I worked at Verdant Analytics, a mid-sized carbon credit consulting firm headquartered in Denver, Colorado. We help corporations measure, offset, and reduce their environmental footprints. Sounds noble, right? It was, mostly before the wolves arrived in Patagonia fleece. I joined Verdant 7 years ago at 23, fresh out of Colorado State with a master's in applied mathematics and $91,000 in student loans hanging around my neck like a very expensive necklace nobody asked for. Starting salary, $54,000 a year. My apartment in Aurora had a radiator that sounded like a dying cat inside a tin can. But I had purpose and decent coffee. 2 out of 3 isn't bad. The firm had about 70 employees when I started. The founder, a genuinely decent human being named Carl, had built the place from the ground up. Carl remembered everyone's birthdays. Carl once apologized to the office plant for the HVAC being out of calibration. You get the picture. Good man. Too good, maybe, for what was coming. My official title, data analyst. My unofficial title, which I gave myself, the guy who makes the chaos make sense. Verdant's carbon credit valuation process was, to put it diplomatically, a masterpiece of organized suffering. 3 spreadsheets, 2 legacy databases stitched together with hope, and 1 IT contractor named Phil who we all prayed would never retire. A calculation methodology that took 4 people 2 full weeks to produce what should have taken 1 person 2 hours. Clients were unhappy, Carl was unhappy, Phil was extremely unhappy. The spreadsheets themselves seemed personally offended every time someone tried to use them, so I did what apparently nobody else had considered. I fixed it, on my own time, in my own apartment, using my own laptop and a secondhand server I found on eBay for $2,200. Over 20 months, I built a proprietary algorithm. I'm calling it Verde here, not its real name, that automated the entire valuation process. Machine learning integration, real-time regulatory data feeds, accuracy within 0, 3% margin of error. It processed in hours what previously took weeks. In the carbon credit market, that's basically alchemy. I spent roughly $41,000 of my own money. Missed my cousin Elena's wedding, missed my own 26th birthday dinner. My girlfriend at the time, Priya, left me in month 16. You're more in love with that algorithm than with me, she said. Reader, she was not entirely wrong, but here's the thing I did that would save everything later. On firm advice from my friend and contract attorney, Dominic, I documented everything. Every receipt, every timestamp, every line of code written outside company hours on personal equipment. Because Dominic had looked me in the eye and said, the moment you show this to your boss, they will want to own it. Make sure they cannot. When I finally showed Carl, he stood up from his desk and walked around it to shake my hand, which is apparently a thing people actually do in real life when you hand them something extraordinary. Marcus, this is incredible. I know, I said, because I did. Is this company property? It is not. He looked at me with something between admiration and respect. We sat down with Dominic and Carl's business attorney. I licensed Verdi to Verdant Analytics for $40,000 annually. Inflation adjusted, I retained full patent ownership. And at Dominic's insistence, there was one very specific clause buried in Section 7. Subsection 4, license validity contingent on maintenance of agreed compensation structure and continued employment in good standing. Carl signed it without blinking. Frankly, Marcus, you could have charged us 10 times this. I know, I said, but I'm not here to gouge anyone. I just want protection. I got a $15,000 implementation bonus and a commemorative mug that read, Innovation Champion. I'd spent $41,000 building the things, so the math still hurt, but I had my insurance policy. That's what Dominic called it. This clause is your nuclear option, Marcus. Let's hope you never need it. Spoiler, we needed it. Verde went live and Verdant Analytics became a completely different company. Processing time dropped 94%. Error rates went to near 0. We could take on clients we'd previously been forced to turn away. Revenue climbed from $28 million annually to $67 million in year 1. Year 3, $142 million. Year 5, $198 million. We scaled from 70 employees to 340, opened a Boston office, landed Fortune 500 accounts. My salary climbed to $98,000. Good, not spectacular, considering I'd personally built the engine the entire machine ran on. But Carl valued me. I was happy. Life was fine. Then Carl retired. Of course he did. The board spent 3 months searching for his replacement. They wanted someone who could scale operations aggressively and drive shareholder value. Translation: someone who had never in their life apologized to an office plant. In January, they hired Cassandra Merritt, 35 years old, Wharton MBA, 4 years at a private equity firm where she'd restructured, their word, 6 different companies. My word for what she did to those companies: gutted. Cassandra arrived February 1st. She immediately rearranged the executive suite, replaced Carl's framed photos of company milestones with abstract art that looked like someone had sneezed expressively on a canvas, and began every single meeting with some variation of the same sentence. Real impact requires hard choices. That was her thing, her motto, her North Star, her signature scent, her entire personality, apparently. She said it when she restructured the client services team. Real impact requires hard choices. She said it when she eliminated the office coffee budget. Real impact requires hard choices. This was, objectively, a war crime punishable under Geneva. She said it when she cut the junior analyst mentorship program. Real impact requires hard choices. I started keeping a tally on a post-it note. I quickly ran out of room on the post-it note. I started a spreadsheet. This felt appropriate. What Cassandra never said, not once, not ever, was real impact requires hard choices when she approved her own $340,000 annual salary, her corporate car allowance, or her quarterly strategic alignment retreats at a resort in Scottsdale. Funny how the hard choices always seem to land on everyone except the person making them. The mental gymnastics required to justify this deserved at minimum a regional qualifier for the Hypocrisy Olympics. In week 3, I had my one-on-one with Cassandra. She had imported a new CFO, a man named Philip Strout, who had followed her from her previous company and had the energy of someone who had never once laughed at anything in his entire adult life. Marcus, Cassandra said, clicking through a spreadsheet on her laptop without looking up. We've been doing a compensation analysis. Okay, I said, which is what you say when you already sense this conversation is about to become a crime scene. Your current package isn't aligned with market benchmarks for your role classification. My role classification. I built the platform your entire company operates on. But sure, role classification. Philip slid a folder across the table with the energy of someone delivering bad news they find personally boring. I opened it. Salary reduction. $98,000 to $71,400. A 27% cut. Annual performance bonus eliminated entirely. Health insurance switched to high deductible $5,500 out of pocket before a single thing is covered. Vacation days from 20 to 14. I looked up. Is this a joke? It's a market correction, Cassandra said. First direct eye contact of the meeting. We need to think about current contribution, not historical accomplishments. Current contribution. I maintain Verde. I update it quarterly. I ensure 99.8% uptime. That is current contribution. That is what is currently keeping every light in this building on. Cassandra. I maintain the algorithm running every client engagement this company has, I said, very calmly, professionally. That system has been operational for years, Philip said, consulting his notes like I was a rounding error. The ongoing maintenance is manageable at a lower compensation level. You're a data analyst, Marcus? A good one, but we're optimizing for the future. A data analyst. Just a spreadsheet guy. Definitely not the person whose intellectual property underpins a $200 million annual operation. Definitely not that. And then Cassandra leaned forward and, I need you to appreciate this moment. She said it. Real impact requires hard choices, Marcus. This is one of them. I want everyone to sit with the cosmic irony of that sentence for just a moment. I want you to really let it marinate. A company lawyer in the corner slid papers toward me. Sign here. Sign here. Effective April 1st. I thought about Dominic. I thought about Section 7, Subsection 4. I thought about every weekend I'd sacrificed, every dollar I'd spent, every line of code written at 2 a.m. while Priya slept, and I built something that was currently generating $200 million a year for a company that had just decided I was overpaid. Can I have 24 hours to review? I asked. This isn't really a negotiation, Cassandra said, and then, real impact requires hard choices. We need your signature today. I picked up the pen, signed every page. Grace. My hands were shaking the entire drive home. Not from fear, from something much colder and much more patient. I called Dominic from the parking garage. Dom, I need to see you tonight. Something in my voice made him skip the questions. Murphy's, 8 o'clock. I told him everything, every word. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for about 4 seconds. Pull up your licensing agreement. Already have it. Section 7, subsection 4. Read it. 1OE, license validity contingent on maintenance of agreed compensation structure and continued employment in good standing. Dominic made a sound I can only describe as professionally delighted. Marcus, they just breached your contract, unilaterally. Reducing your compensation directly violates the licensing terms. What does that mean? It means you can revoke their license to use Verde. Immediately, legally, completely. I processed this. What happens if I do? Every client engagement stops. Their valuation platform goes dark. They cannot process a single carbon credit assessment. Every active contract becomes impossible to fulfill. The whole operation halts. That's legal? Cleaner than a whistle. It's your intellectual property. They breach the agreement. You terminate the license. Any judge in the country would back you up before lunch. I thought about 340 people. I thought about Carl's legacy. I thought about Cassandra Merritt saying real impact requires hard choices while approving Scottsdale strategy retreats. What do? You make a hard choice, Dominic said, and I genuinely believe he'd been saving that line since I called him. Then you wait. We spent 3 hours drafting the revocation notice. Every clause documented, every violation cited, every sentence legally bulletproof. He sent it at 11:14 p.m. to Cassandra, to Philip, to the full board, to Verdant's legal department. Now we wait, Dominic said. How long? Until they blink. And Marcus, they will blink very fast. Edit. For everyone asking, yes, I signed the new terms intentionally. Signing on the record was how we formally documented the breach. Signing was the trap. They walked right into it. Edit 2. For everyone asking how I feel like someone who spent $41,000 and 20 months building something extraordinary and got told he was a data analyst with misaligned market benchmarks. I feel exactly like that. Hey, update is here. Several hundred people have asked. Here it is. Friday, March 22nd, normal morning. Arrived at 8 a.m. Grabbed the last decent coffee before Cassandra's budget cuts rendered the machine a decorative object. Reviewed overnight system logs. Verde running at 99.9% uptime, 0 errors. Like always, because I built it that way and I maintain it with the care of someone who understands exactly what it's worth. At 9:45, Cassandra's assistant called. Ms. Merritt needs you, now. I walked to her office. She was standing by the window. Nobody stands by windows dramatically unless something has gone catastrophically wrong and they've already decided it's your fault. She turned and held up a printed copy of Dominic's revocation notice like she was presenting Exhibit A. What is this? Not a question. A statement of rage wearing a question mark's close. A notice of license revocation. I said pleasantly, you breached our licensing agreement when you unilaterally reduced my compensation, so the license is terminated. You cannot shut down this company over a pay adjustment. Apparently, enforcing intellectual property rights has been reclassified as shutting down a company. I am learning something new about employment law every single day. I'm not shutting anything down, I said. I'm enforcing my contract. The same contract you ignored when you decided my current contribution wasn't worth my current compensation. She stared at me. You're holding us hostage. I'm a data analyst, I said with complete sincerity. What do I know about leverage? Philip appeared. Renata, Verdant's general counsel, appeared. She looked like someone who had read the notice at 6 a.m. and spent the intervening hours quietly catastrophizing. They talked over each other. I mostly observed because I had nowhere to be. Cassandra finally pulled herself together and leveled her gaze at me. We will litigate this. Cool, I said. Dominic's contact info is in the email. Every day you litigate, your platform stays dark. We'll rebuild the system independently. Poor bastard had no idea what kind of hornet's nest she'd casually dropped a lit match into. Building a replacement for Verdi would take years and tens of millions of dollars. The idea that they could reconstruct it before hemorrhaging their entire client base was the kind of optimism that deserves its own motivational poster. Good luck, I said sincerely. I'll send you some tutorial links. I returned to my desk, sent a company-wide email suggesting people wrap up anything time-sensitive, backed up my personal files, and at 4:51 p.m., opened Verde's administration panel, changed Verdant Analytics license status from active to terminated, watched every monitor on the floor go dark. The sound that followed can best be described as a building discovering all at once that it has no floor. I grabbed my jacket and walked to the elevator. My phone was ringing before the doors closed. I let it ring. Saturday morning. Dominic sent me a Bloomberg link. Verdant Analytics shares plunge 41% amid platform crisis. The subtitle, Operational Failure Raises Questions About Infrastructure Resilience. Operational resilience, magnificent euphemism for a man whose contract you violated owns the software your company runs on. Sunday, stock down 58% total. My former colleague, Benny, texted asking what was happening. I told him I was on a personal sabbatical. My former manager, Kira, sent me an actual muffin basket. Blueberry, with a handwritten note. We always knew you were the engine. Hope you're okay. I ate every muffin. Sunday, 4:22 p.m. Email from the board chair, Arthur Blackwell, a man who had built 3 companies and was, by all accounts, not an idiot. Subject line, request for conversation. I forwarded it to Dominic. They're ready, he said. Edit. To the 200 people who asked if I feel guilty? No. She said, real impact requires hard choices, 9 times in meetings I personally attended. I lost count of how many she said in meetings I didn't attend. She was right. It does. Hi. Many of you have been refreshing my profile hourly. Here is your reward. Monday. Dominic and I drafted our terms. Tuesday, 9 a.m. We walked into Verdant headquarters in our best we have nothing to prove to anyone in this building energy. The boardroom, Arthur Blackwell at the head, 6 other board members, 2 external advisors, and sitting at the far end, looking like a souffle that had been left in a draft, Cassandra Merritt. Arthur stood when we entered. He shook my hand. He did not comment on the circumstances of our last interaction, which was courteous of him. Marcus, let's be direct. Please, I said, 4 days of complete platform failure. Stock down 58%. 11 major clients had issued formal notices of concern. 3 had begun evaluating alternative providers. Estimated losses, approximately $3.1 million per day. Total market cap decline, over $800 million. Arthur slid an analysis across the table. Numbers, projections, disaster scenarios. The kind of document that exists solely to communicate, please stop doing this to us. Dominic slid our proposal back. $7.5 million one-time licensing settlement, $1.8 million annually going forward, full restoration of my compensation, plus a 35% raise to $132,300 protected by ironclad contract, and Cassandra Merritt's resignation. She came out of her chair like she'd been launched. This is extortion. This is insane. You cannot force a board to remove their own CEO. We're not forcing anything, Dominic said, with the patience of someone who has explained legal realities to furious executives many, many times. You're free to decline all terms. Your systems remain inaccessible and we'll see you in court, where I'll be delighted to present documentation of the license breach. I looked at Cassandra. Real impact requires hard choices, I said. I'm not going to pretend I didn't enjoy that. I'm only human. The room went quiet enough that you could hear the ventilation system. Arthur looked at Cassandra, then at the board. How long to rebuild the system independently, Renata? Renata, the general counsel, delivered the news without flinching. Minimum 18 months. Realistically, 2 to 3 years. Cost between $14 and $22 million. And during that period, we cannot fulfill our current client contracts, which meant bankruptcy before reconstruction was complete. The math did not check out, unless you counted in the direction of catastrophe. The board voted. Cassandra's resignation, 6-2. The 2 dissenters were her personal appointments to the board, and even they looked like they knew they were on the wrong side of history. Arthur turned to her very quietly. Submit your resignation by end of day. We'll honor your full severance and keep it professional. She stood, looked at me with an expression I can only describe as a person comprehending the full consequences of their own hard choices. She opened her mouth, closed it, walked out. Philip followed without making eye contact with anyone, which suggested he had already begun updating his LinkedIn. Arthur turned to me. The rest of your terms, we accept. One more thing, I said. He raised an eyebrow. There was a board advisor who had been sitting quietly in the corner throughout the entire meeting, taking precise notes and asking exactly 2 questions, both of which were the sharpest questions anyone in the room had asked all morning. Her name was Dr. Simone Park, 48 years old, former CEO of 2 environmental consulting firms, currently advising 3 boards and teaching corporate strategy at CU Denver. Her, I said, for interim CEO. Arthur blinked. Dr. Park looked startled. She's asked the right questions every time, I said. This company needs someone who thinks before they decide. You have one sitting in that chair. Dr. Park was quiet for about 10 seconds. If the board agrees, I'll consider it. They voted immediately. Unanimous. Wednesday morning, Dominic and I returned to sign the agreement. $7.5 million wired before noon. Quarterly licensing fees established. My new protected contract signed and dated. I restored Verde access at 11:03 a.m. Every monitor on the floor came back online simultaneously. Someone in the open workspace actually cheered. I heard it from the hallway. The stock recovered 38% by Friday. Business press ran headlines about the dramatic resolution. One piece called it a cautionary tale about undervaluing critical intellectual assets. I printed that one. It's on my refrigerator between Elena's wedding photo and a blueberry muffin wrapper I kept for sentimental reasons. Hi, last one. Here's where everything landed. The company. Stock recovered to approximately 81% of pre-crisis value. Still climbing. Dr. Park has been, candidly, extraordinary. She rebuilt client relationships, restructured management to include the people actually doing the work, and instituted a formal policy. Any compensation changes affecting staff with IP-related agreements must be reviewed by external legal counsel first. Apparently, this is what people call learning from experience. See, my team grew from 4 analysts to 9. Every single one of them is fairly compensated. I made sure of that personally. I've become somewhat evangelical about it. The money, $7.5 million, sits mostly in conservative investments. I bought a real apartment and one where the radiator functions as a heating device rather than a percussion instrument. Paid off my student loans in a single transaction, which I described to Dominic as the most satisfying 6 seconds of my adult life. Started a college fund for Elena's kids. Elena, whose wedding I missed because I was writing Verde's core data pipeline. She forgave me when I told her the full story. She also sent me a muffin basket. Denver has a muffin basket culture I was previously unaware of. I support it entirely. The licensing fees, $1.8 million annually, paid quarterly. First payment, cleared in July. I watched the deposit notification for about 2 full minutes. Then I went back to work. Additional licensing. In September, through Dominic, I licensed Verde to 3 other firms in adjacent industries. Combined annual value, $9.2 million. My accountant, a man not given to emotional displays, looked at the contract structure and said, in a tone that communicated profound respect. Cassandra. Her LinkedIn bio now reads Strategic Transformation Leader. Driving real impact through bold decision making. The growth is genuinely inspiring. She connected a request to me in October. I declined it. She has, at least, retired the catchphrase from public view. Philip left Verdant in November. Now, freelance consulting. He emailed asking if I knew anyone hiring. I said I'd keep my ears open. I have not kept my ears open. Priya texted me in August. Saw you in the business news. Always knew you were going somewhere. Sorry I didn't stick around. I appreciated the sentiment. I did not respond. I was busy monitoring a quarterly deposit. Dr. Park called me to her office 2 months in. Carl's old office, completely transformed. Actual workspace, notes pinned everywhere, a whiteboard covered in real questions. She asked me to take a formal advisory role alongside my technical responsibilities. Input on all major operational decisions affecting infrastructure. Cassandra's mistake was thinking she knew everything, she said. I know what I don't know. And I don't know what you know. I said yes. Last week, she apologized to the office plant for the HVAC being slow to warm up in the morning. I think she's going to be fine. Carl would have liked her. What I come back to sometimes late at night is Dominic saying they will blink, and when they do, that's when you name your price. They blinked after 4 days. I spent 20 months building Verdi, $41,000 of my own money, Priya's patience, Elena's wedding, 2 years of weekends, my 26th birthday dinner, eaten alone at my desk with cold delivery food while I debugged a data integration module. And a woman who had real impact requires hard choices as her personal professional mantra, a woman who repeated it like a liturgy, who had it practically tattooed on her decision making, needed exactly 4 days to discover what that phrase actually means when the choices aren't yours to make. She made a hard choice when she cut my salary. I made a harder one when I revoked the license. Mine had better terms. Stay safe out there. Document everything. Know what you own, and if someone calls you just the data guy, smile, nod, and remember where. Section 7, subsection 4 lives. Marcus P.S. For everyone asking, yes, the mug that says Innovation Champion is still in my office. Some things you keep.